And you're on with John and Matt.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Murray.
I'm good. Happy birthday, and hi, John.
Thank you.
I have a situation. I was raised Catholic, and then I was in a Foursquare church, and I was in the Way International cult for about 15 years.
Wow, you've had a road.
That, yeah. And a few years ago, my son, who is an adult, called me and said, I'm an atheist. And I said, well, I'd rather have you an atheist than in the cult with your dad. And he just cracked up laughing. And I guess that wasn't his.
I'd rather have him an atheist than in any religion, but I might be coming at it from a slightly different angle. Cult is often the label that the big church puts on the little church, and I realize that that's not completely true. There are cults that are more harmful, more isolating than others. We know that to be the case, and so I'm happy that you've at least found your way out of that cult-like environment. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I've been in the churches for all my life. I'm 64, and I thought, well, I respect my son as a person, and so I wanted to find out more about it. So I've started listening to your guys' show and Aaron Ra and Steph Andrews and a bunch of you guys. And I really like, oh, that's a good point. Okay, right. Okay, I can see where Noah's Ark that I believed in was really stupid. How could I ever believe in that? But there are things in my own life, like the only thing I can attribute to is that God's intervention. Then I hear you guys say that's a ignorance fallacy.
Well, we'd need an example, but the thing is, anytime somebody says, oh, the only explanation I can think of is God, well, that still doesn't mean that you've exhausted all possibilities. And how could you possibly know that God is even a candidate? So, like, let's say something happens. The way we try to figure out what it is we list all the known candidate explanations, and then we evaluate the evidence for and against each one of them. And then if we have one that has sufficient evidence for it and not against it, then we tentatively accept that this is the most probable answer. But when I'm listing candidate explanations for something, I don't even know how God gets included in there, because we have no demonstration that there is a God or that God can do anything or that it should be a candidate. As a matter of fact, most of the evidence points to when people can't find another explanation, they just throw this God candidate in there without any justification at all.
Well, when I was 18, I lost a baby, and an infection set in, and over a period of 9.5 years, and 4 different high-risk specialists, infertility specialists, they all told me, like, battery of tests, and that I had a tumor in my uterus, my fallopian tubes were totally scarred, and all of the tests were always negative. And the last one we went to finally said, look, if you're going to have children, you're going to have to adopt. Well, 3 months later, I was pregnant, and they couldn't, and all that time that I was believing God, and like in one of the scriptures, it says, he maketh the barren woman the joyful mother of children, and I was able to have 2. And it's like all those medical tests said that there was no way I could physically have children.
And clearly they were wrong.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that medicine isn't an exact science. I mean, human beings were pretty similar, but we're not all the same. My ex-wife, for example, her mother was told that she could never have children either. And that's why Beth was viewed as the miracle baby. They only ever had the one. And so things have come a long way, since I was born, and probably since you were having kids, so that we now have other options. There's various, like IVF and things like that, where you can have science intervene and do stuff. But the truth is, the human body is really, really good at repairing damage and acting in ways that are quirky. Sometimes illnesses just go away, and sometimes things improve enough. So when a doctor is telling you, hey, based on the studies and everything else, it doesn't look like you're ever going to be having children, They're making an educated guess based on statistics of all the other people that they've seen with these conditions and what is most likely to happen, because it would be medically unethical for them to get your hopes up that you are the 1 in 1,000 exemption or the 1 in 100,000 exemption. But even at 1 in 100,000, that's something that's going to happen literally every day.
Right.
I mean, 7 billion plus people on the planet, a 1 in a million shot is happening, fairly regularly. And yet, when we're giving medical advice to people, if it's a 1 in a million shot, we generally err on the side of not getting hopes up. The doctor was probably wrong to speak in absolutes to say you will never have kids. I think that was a mistake, and I'd like to see, medical ethics and I think they have kind of changed on that. But so you're told that you're not going to be able to have kids, and then you end up having 2 of them. Awesome.
Right.
I don't know what the explanation for that is. I don't know whether or not there's a God who could even be a candidate explanation, but I know that your story is not remotely unique. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to bet, although I haven't searched for it myself, that if you did a Google search, a decent Google search for people who were told they were barren and still were able to have kids, you're going to find support groups. You're going to find, all kinds of stories like that. And some of them are probably going to credit their religion or their God. And they may be crediting different religions and different gods.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
And so my thing isn't, oh my gosh, Murray, you're so silly and how could you be so wrong? I would never do anything like that. My thing is, I don't see that there's a justification for attributing this to a God or even anything especially miraculous when it's just incredibly unlikely, and unlikely things happen all the time. It's certainly enough to make you think about these things, but I wouldn't think it'd be enough to convince you or convince anybody. I would need more than that before I could ever go to the best explanation for this is God.
And for the last about 6-8 months, I've been watching the shows and reading books on atheism, and it's like I like what you say, that you want to know the truth, because there was times I think, well, I don't want to give up my thought of an afterlife, and then I'm not sure who said it, that you didn't mind it before you were born, so why would you mind it after you're dead? I thought, well, that I can deal with that. So it's like I'd rather be right than. And there's times I kind of sitting here thinking, oh God, I really want to talk to him, please God. I thought, oh, this is great. I'm asking God to help me get on to an atheist.
Well, clearly your prayer has been answered, but it was answered by John and myself.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Here's the thing. You have reached a conclusion that many people have for what I think are bad reasons, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean anything. It's just you are as uncomfortable as everybody else I've ever met with saying, I don't know how or why this happened, and I'm okay with that.
But I know you understand when I say that for so long in my life I sought God and I tried to be a godly wife and a woman of God, and then after I left the cult, I left Christianity as a whole, and now it's like I sought to have the truth and to know the truth when I was in the groups. And I find that I'm back at that thing. It's like I want to know the truth again. And I want to be able to say I'm living my life honestly and not living in an illusion, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an incredibly frustrating thing. I can say this. I thought I was right when I was a believer, and now I realize not that I was wrong about the facts, but wrong about the way I came to my conclusion. When Talk Heathen ends and they send out the love rings and they say, we don't hate you, we just think you're wrong, I had a problem with that particular phrase, because it's not that I'm convinced they are wrong about whether or not there's a God. It's just that I'm not convinced that there's a God. But I am convinced that most of them are wrong about one thing, and that is what evidence would should be considered sufficient to warrant belief. That's the thing I think they're wrong about. And they want to try and say that I'm too skeptical or I have standards of evidence that are too high. And no, I have a set of standard of evidence such that I'm less likely to be wrong in the future. And if there is a God, then, and this God performed a miracle to give you your two wonderful kids, why is that God not openly, clearly presenting himself to you as you struggle with your faith?
Right.
Because if you already believe he exists and you've been trying to live a life that is good and just within Christianity, and he's got you, then it can't possibly do any damage for him to clearly reveal himself and provide you with answers and explanations if the alternative is you are now mired in doubt, you are becoming upset and unsettled by these things, and may wind up a godless heathen or something, or switching religions or whatever. This is all on God's shoulders. Why is God absent and quiet and silent, even for the faithful? I'm an atheist not because I got mad at religion or anything else. I set out to be the best Christian I could be. I thought that God wanted me to be a preacher. And every time I'd run into problems, I would pray and pray and pray and pray. And nothing. Never heard a thing, never felt a thing, nothing. And Christians out there watching will say, well, that's because you hardened your heart and God wouldn't reveal himself and all this. Fine. All that does is tell me how confident you are. It doesn't tell me whether or not it's true. If God can help Joe shit the ragman down the street find his car keys and get a winning lottery ticket, certainly he can take someone who's eager and willing to do what it is that they think God wants them to do and toss him a bone, give him a quick answer. If a Damascus Road experience is good enough for Saul, then it should be good enough for everybody. Otherwise, God's playing favorites. And if he is playing favorites, he's entitled to do that, but screw him. I'm no longer under any obligation to care once that's the case. It's like if you found the head referee in your game is completely biased towards the other team. Do you even keep playing?
Right. One thing that I've questioned for my daughter's 36 now, and she's schizophrenic. And I think, okay, if God was going to bless me with a miracle baby, then why did he give her schizophrenia?
Yes.
It's like, what kind of God would do that?
Yeah.
Well, what kind of God would if God makes barren women fruitful, why did he let you go through years and years of suffering and pain before he decided to do something about it? And
you're going to get answers to some of those questions. You are going to get answers, and you're going to get answers from apologists, and they're going to say things like, because God wanted to teach you a valuable lesson. God wanted to teach you about trusting him, about praying him, about letting him lead your life. And all of those things will occasionally sound appealing. Like, why would God give me a child that's schizophrenic? Well, that's because this will teach you things and you will come out the other side stronger.
Or he knew you could handle parenting a disabled child. I hear that a lot.
Because someday you're going to run into another parent who had a disabled child or somebody with a condition, and now you're going to be valuable to them. This was all a good learning lesson. It's the same thing when people ask, why do children die? Don't take the glib answers of, well, God needed another angel in heaven. They'll say, no, this was about teaching you something important. Well, I will say loudly and proudly, fuck that kind of God, because that is malicious, evil. If you want to teach me a lesson, if you want to educate me on something, you don't have to kill somebody else to do it. You don't have to torture somebody else to do it. You don't have to ruin somebody else's life to do it. You don't have to put an extra burden of mental health issues on somebody else's life to teach me a lesson. And if that's the only way to teach the lesson, then just eliminate the mental health issues entirely. And now there's no reason for anybody to ever learn that lesson. Why on earth would a God create a world in which your brain is what you use to get around, and then throw specific roadblocks up to people, giving them strong delusions, giving them brains that are incapable of processing this information and coming up with standards of evidence? If that's the case, then all of them who follow this kind of model have rigged the game against us, and I'm not playing.
Yeah. Now, there's no one here. Richmond, Indiana is a very small town, and there's nobody here that I can talk to about it. Is there groups near Richmond that I could reach out to?
First thing to do is contact the large national organizations, things like American Atheist, because they have state directors. They also have regional directors. Obviously, you can do a Google search for Richmond, Indiana Atheist or Richmond, Indiana Free Thought, Richmond, Indiana Secular, and see what you find there. And I always tell people this: if there isn't a group in your area, you should consider starting one, because you're definitely not alone, unless you're like in a town of 4.
And even then,
and even then, you might not be alone. But I realize that not everybody's in a position where they're able and willing to take that kind of step. I would be very surprised if there's not some sort of secular organization within driving distance of almost anybody in the U.S. And if that's the case, and you're unable or unwilling to start one, there are still online organizations that you can interact with. And you can consider doing things like, I'm going to be in Cincinnati, Ohio at the American Atheist Convention over Easter weekend. And, if you don't have anything else to do on Easter weekend and you're able to, it may be worth the drive to come up and do that. And the nice thing about that is when you go to like a national convention, you may be able to find the people who are in your local area and say, you know what, we don't have a group in our area. I can't start it on my own. And now you have people who are potentially friends who can help do that as well.
Do you think that I would be able to go just the one on Saturday rather than the whole weekend?
I tell you,
to go to the whole weekend.
Yeah,
probably.
I'll tell you this. I'm going to put you on hold and let the call screener get your information. And if you want to drive up to Cincinnati for the American Atheist Convention just for Saturday, I will pay for your day that Saturday to make it easier for you just to come up for the one day, and I'll cover that.
Really? Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I would love to come.
I appreciate the call.
I'm
we are
finding a lot of freedom in this.
Yeah, we are over time, and they're about to start serving the pizza out there, and I don't want to miss out on it. But I'm going to put you on hold, and we'll get the information. You and I will be in touch, and you come up Saturday for that convention, and it's my treat.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
I will be there.